Ava was always the strong one, the one who smiled the brightest, the one who checked in on others, sent encouraging texts, and prayed when no one else remembered to. But no one knew the storm she carried inside, because Ava had learned to hide her wounds. She had learned to laugh through disappointment, work through heartbreak, and lead through loneliness. People said she was called, chosen, anointed, but what they didn't know was that she was also bleeding. It started years ago, in a home where silence was louder than shouting. Her father left when she was 9. Her mother stayed, but her heart didn't. Ava grew up learning not to ask for too much. She learned that crying wouldn't bring comfort, that speaking up only made things worse. So she became silent, resilient, invisible. Church became her refuge, the place where she felt seen, at least for a while. She was drawn to the music, the messages of love and redemption. And for the first time, she believed that maybe someone in heaven actually cared. But even in church, Ava learned quickly that being needed was safer than being known. So she served. She gave. She never said no, until the day her soul finally did. She was 28, leading a youth ministry, running a women's small group, volunteering at the shelter, and working full-time. Every week was a blur of sermons, planning, problems, and people needing her. Until one Sunday morning, while praying over a young girl at the altar, Ava's body betrayed her. Her knees buckled. Her breath shortened. She felt dizzy, like her soul was sliding away. She collapsed, not in dramatic fashion, not with anyone catching her. She simply folded. The next thing she remembered was waking up in a cold church office, staring at ceiling tiles she didn't recognize. Doctors called it a panic collapse. Too much stress, not enough rest. Her body was shutting down before her spirit could fully admit defeat. The church staff said they understood. They told her to take time off. But within 2 weeks, she stopped receiving texts. Her name was removed from the weekly bulletin. Someone else was leading her small group. The message was unspoken but clear. We love you, but only when you're useful. Ava went home, shut the door, turned off her phone, and vanished. She didn't want to talk to anyone. Not her friends. Not her old mentor. Not even God. Especially not God. She didn't trust him anymore. Why did you let me fall apart? Why didn't you stop me sooner? If I was really called, why do I feel so abandoned? She avoided her Bible. Every worship song felt fake. Every memory of church felt like betrayal. And so, Ava disappeared into her apartment and into her own pain. A month passed, then 2, then 6. The days blurred. She didn't have a job anymore. She sold her car. She stopped praying. Every morning, she'd wake up with heaviness on her chest. Some days, she stayed in bed. Others, she walked aimlessly through parks, headphones on, volume high, trying to drown out the inner voice that kept whispering, "You're a failure. You broke. God can't use broken people." And worst of all, she believed it. One day, in a small burst of emotion, Ava pulled out an old notebook and wrote a letter to God. She never planned to send it, never even planned to finish it. But the words spilled out anyway. I trusted you. I thought I was chosen. But you let me fall apart. You watched me burn out. You saw me bleed and stayed silent. I was trying to serve you. I gave you everything. And now I have nothing. Not even a whisper. If you still see me, say something. She threw the notebook under her bed and cried herself to sleep. Weeks later, Ava found herself sitting on a park bench during a rainy afternoon. She didn't plan to be there. She just walked until her legs gave out. As the drizzle turned into steady rain, a woman with a lavender umbrella sat beside her. She didn't speak. She just offered Ava the umbrella. They sat in silence for minutes. Then the woman said, without looking at her, "You're not invisible, you know. Just because they forgot you doesn't mean God did." Ava turned to her, stunned. "I what?" The woman looked into her eyes. "Your scars don't disqualify you. They're evidence you made it through." And just like that, the woman stood up, handed her the umbrella, and walked away. Ava never saw her again. That night, soaked and cold but strangely awakened, Ava did something she hadn't done in months. She whispered, "Are you still here?" And in the deepest part of her heart, not her ears, not the room, but her soul, She heard, "I never left." Tears came again, but this time not from despair, from relief, because maybe, just maybe, she wasn't beyond saving after all. Healing doesn't always start with joy. Sometimes it starts with stillness, with being honest enough to say, "I'm not okay." And for Ava, that confession was the seed of her healing. After that rainy afternoon and the mysterious woman's words, something changed. Ava didn't suddenly return to church. She didn't become joyful overnight, but she started whispering again. Not loud prayers, not eloquent ones, just simple breaths. "Are you here, Lord? Do you still love me? What do I do with these scars?" Every morning, she'd light a candle on her nightstand, sit at the edge of her bed, and wait in silence. And sometimes she would feel peace. Not always, but sometimes. And that was enough to keep trying. One day, while cleaning out her closet, she found the old notebook, the one with the unsent letter to God. She hesitated, then opened it. On the next blank page, she wrote, "God, I'm not healed. I'm still hurting. But I want to believe you can meet me here." It wasn't poetic. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was honest. And in the silence that followed, Ava felt a whisper in her spirit. "I'm not asking for your perfection. I'm asking for your permission to begin again." Ava signed up for a local art class, not because she was an artist, but because she needed to be around life again. The class was full of strangers, paint, and quiet background music. She chose watercolors because they reminded her that beauty didn't need to be rigid. It could flow. The first thing she painted was a tree. Not in spring, but in winter. Borda, exposed, but still standing. When the teacher walked by, she whispered, "This tree feels like a survivor." Ava nodded, blinking back tears. "Yeah, me too." 2 weeks later, Ava received an email from her old mentor, Clara. It was brief. "I don't know if you're ready to talk, but I've been praying for you. I don't want anything from you. Just to remind you, you're still deeply loved." Ava stared at the screen for 5 minutes, then replied, "I'm not ready to talk much, but thank you. That means more than you know." The next morning, she received a package at her door. It was a book, Strength in the Stillness, Finding God After Everything Falls Apart. Inside was a handwritten note. "This book saved me. I think it's your turn now." The chapter that broke her open that night. Ava read the book until 2 a.m. One line made her sob. God is not afraid of your questions. He's not moved by your silence. He's just waiting for you to stop hiding behind the pain and look him in the eyes again. Ava dropped the book, fell to her knees, and for the first time in months, sobbed into the carpet. Not because she was hopeless, but because she finally felt safe enough to break. And from that moment on, something inside her began to shift. The scar mirror a few days later, Ava stood in front of her bathroom mirror and stared at herself. She lifted her sleeves and looked at the faint scars on her arms from earlier years, when she was younger, lonelier, and desperate for control. She hadn't looked at them in years, had tried to cover them with makeup, jewelry, or long sleeves. But now she stared and whispered, "I'm still here, not ashamed, not disgusted, just honest." She touched one and felt something she hadn't expected. This isn't a shame mark. It's a survival story. For the first time, she felt her scars weren't things to hide. They were proof she had made it. The coffee invitation Clara invited Ava out for coffee the following week. They met at a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon. It felt like the old days, but gentler. Clara didn't ask for updates. She didn't push her. She just said, "God never stopped writing your story." The pen's still in his hand. And your scars? They're part of the chapters that show the world how deep his love goes. Ava smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a polite smile, a real one, because she finally believed it might be true. The question that changed her heart later that night, Ava sat in bed, candle flickering, and whispered, "God, what do you want from me now?" And for the first time, the answer wasn't about service or striving. It was simple, "Let me love you." Ava sobbed, not because she felt guilty, but because she had made love so complicated. She thought she had to earn it, deserve it, work for it. But now, she simply received it. The return of music, Ava pulled out her old keyboard, the one she hadn't touched in a year. She played softly, clumsily, fingers shaking. A simple melody came, then a few lyrics. They weren't polished. You saw me broken, and still you stayed. You didn't flinch when the pieces fell. You called me chosen. Even in the dark, she sang it through tears. And for the first time, she felt like herself again. Not because she was healed, but because she was healing. Ava had made peace with the silence. But she wasn't prepared for the voice. Not the kind that thundered from the sky. Not one that echoed from pulpits or podcasts. This voice was personal, gentle, sure, and it spoke when the world was quiet. The dream that opened her eyes, it began with a dream. Ava stood in a field of wildflowers, barefoot and confused. The sky above her was dark, but she saw light streaming from behind her. She turned to find the source, but no one was there. Then a whisper came, soft and deep, yet unmistakable. You've walked through the valley, but I never stopped walking with you. She woke up with tears on her face and her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in months, she felt seen by God. The whisper that followed that morning, she made tea, lit her candle, and opened her Bible randomly. Her eyes fell on Isaiah 43 verse 2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Her hand trembled. It wasn't a coincidence. It was confirmation. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't forgotten. God had seen it all. Her collapse, her silence, her scars. And still, he stayed. An invitation to share a week later, Clara messaged her. There's a women's retreat next month. No pressure, but they're looking for someone to speak on surviving burnout and rediscovering faith. Ava stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every part of her wanted to say no. She wasn't healed yet, wasn't ready to teach or lead. But then the voice in her heart whispered again, you don't need to speak from the mountaintop. Just speak from the valley I met you in. She typed back, I'll do it. The preparation as the retreat approached, Ava felt nerves rise. What would she say? How could she tell her story without unraveling? She prayed, journaled, and fasted, not out of duty, but desperation. One night, she opened her notebook and wrote, what if they judge me, Lord? And quietly came the reply in her spirit, I didn't call you to be perfect. I called you to be true. So she wrote her testimony, not polished, not sanitized, but raw and real, just like her scars. The retreat center was nestled in the hills, surrounded by pine trees and early spring winds. When Ava stepped onto the small stage, her hands trembled. She looked out at 30 women, some smiling, some guarded, some clearly broken. And then she began, I used to think my scars were shameful, that if anyone saw them, they'd see weakness. But Jesus told me something different. He said, your scars are the evidence you survived, and I'm proud of you. The room went silent. And then, sniffles. As she shared her story, her collapse, the silence, the slow return, women began weeping. Some came up afterward to hug her, others to say, thank you for telling the truth. I thought I was the only one. A new song that night, sitting alone on the retreat center balcony. Ava picked up her guitar and sang softly. I wore my pain like armor, hid my tears in light. But you saw what broke me, and never left my side. She hadn't written it. It just came. A new kind of worship, not for crowds, just between her and God. And that was more than enough. The unexpected offer the following week. Ava received an email from a faith-based mental health organization. They heard about her talk. Someone in the audience had recommended her. Would you consider sharing your story in our online women's series? Ava closed the laptop and breathed deep. Fear rose again, but this time, it didn't paralyze her. Instead, she whispered, God, if this is you, I'll do it afraid. Because now she knew he was with her in the fear, and he spoke through the scars. A visit to the mirror before recording the video, Ava stood before her bathroom mirror again. She rolled up her sleeves, looked at the faint scars, and smiled. You tried to destroy me, but God turned you into ministry. She touched one scar lightly and whispered, thank you, Jesus, for staying when I didn't even want you to. She didn't hide her arms in the video. She didn't edit the tears. She just showed up, scars and all. The message that broke her again 2 days after the video went live. Ava received a message. Hi, Ava. I don't know you, but I found your video after searching faith and depression. I've been self-harming for over a year, but tonight I didn't. I cried instead, and I wrote a prayer. Thank you for showing me that Jesus still speaks. Ava read it 3 times, then fell to her knees and wept, not from sadness, but awe. God, you really are using my scars. And in that holy moment, she whispered, use every part of me. Scars don't disappear when we heal, but they stop being wounds and start becoming witnesses. And now Ava was learning to live in that witness. The restored table months passed. Ava didn't rush into ministry. She wasn't trying to rebuild her old life. Instead, she focused on becoming whole in body, mind, and soul. She started counseling again, this time with a faith-based therapist who didn't just talk, but listened deeply. They unpacked the burnout, the abandonment, the lies she had believed for years. You learn to love others better than you loved yourself, the therapist once said. But God never asked you to burn out to prove your worth. That line stayed with Ava. She wrote it down, spoke it out loud, posted it on her mirror, and with every session, every journal page, every whispered prayer, she was rising, not back into who she was, but into who she was always meant to be. A voice for the broken invitations came slowly. A podcast interview, a youth panel discussion, a small church women's group. Each time, Ava brought the same truth. Your scars are not the end of your story. They're where Jesus begins to speak. She didn't quote 1,000 verses. She didn't preach. She told the truth, and that was enough. One night, after a virtual event, she received a message from a young girl named Layla. I watched you cry and didn't feel weird about my own tears. My arms look like yours, but now I know Jesus doesn't turn away. Ava whispered, through tears of her own, thank you, God, for turning pain into purpose. Restoration at the door one morning, a knock came. When Ava opened the door, she froze. It was Mariah, her former pastor's wife, the woman who once mentored her. The same one who had never reached out after Ava collapsed. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mariah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to begin, she said softly. I should have come sooner. I was ashamed. Not of you, of how we handled it. I'm so sorry. Ava didn't speak at first. She didn't know what to say. But her heart, healed by God's mercy, whispered, this is also part of the story. She stepped aside and said gently, come in. They cried. They laughed. They prayed. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was sacred. Another scar healed. Another chapter written. Back to the place of collapse 1 year after her breakdown, Ava returned to the church building where she collapsed. She sat quietly in the same pew. No one was there, just sunlight and stillness. She knelt at the altar, not as a leader, not as someone with answers, but as a daughter, and whispered, thank you for letting me break here, because now I can rise. She stood slowly. And this time, she didn't feel faint. She felt free. An unexpected connection, Ava received a handwritten letter in the mail. It had no return address. Inside was a short note. You gave me your umbrella in the rain, and I never forgot your words. Your scars are survival stories. You didn't know it, but I was planning to take my life that night. Because of your kindness, I'm still here. Thank you. Ava held the letter for a long time. She had forgotten that moment, but God hadn't. He had turned even her small acts of kindness into life-saving miracles. God, you really do waste nothing. A stage Ava didn't expect the following year. Ava was invited to speak at a national women's conference. She hesitated. The old fears came back. What if I mess up? What if I'm not polished enough? What if my pain isn't big enough? But then she remembered the voice in the dark. I didn't call you to be perfect. I called you to be true. And she said yes. When Ava walked onto the stage, her voice trembled at first, but then she looked at the crowd, thousands of women, many of them carrying scars they couldn't name, and said, you don't need to hide. Jesus sees every scar, and he calls you survivor, not shameful, not unworthy, but chosen. The auditorium went silent, then erupted in applause. But Ava didn't smile for the applause. She smiled because she finally felt peace. The return of joy didn't rush in. It returned quietly. In small things, the sunrise over her apartment balcony, the sound of her laughter echoing with friends, the moments she prayed, not because she needed something, but because she wanted to talk to God. She sang again. She painted. She rested. And most importantly, she loved herself again. Not the way the world teaches, but the way Jesus had shown her. Through mercy, through scars, through grace.